Hello everyone, I'm Lance. Welcome back to this video. Today we are going to talk about how to add a little bit animation into drag and drop using Lightning Web Component. In this last video we have talked about how to add basic functionality of drag and drop. If you don't know how to do that, please check my last video about how to do that. And today we're going to talk about how to add a little bit animation. Things like this, if you drag it here and it will add some space to let you have this item be placed into it. Now let's begin. Now let's start from our previous example. Think about it. So if we want to add some animation, like if we drag this item here and make it do some animation and respond to this, how should we do that? Well, the thing is, HTML has some coordinate system defined for each item and for your cursor position in this whole HTML page. Something like this. We have x-axis and y-axis. The number at the top and at the left is 0, and all the way to right and to the bottom it all the way adds up. So for example, this is 0 and this is like 1000 something, and this can be 800 something. I just guess the number, and it should not be accurate though, but you get what I mean. So it's from 0 all the way up, turned larger, and all the way turned larger from top to bottom as well. Also for the rectangle, so every single item in here is actually a rectangle. So when we have a rectangle, we can curate the rectangle by a certain function in JavaScript, and once we return that, we can actually have four things defined for us, which is top. Sorry, it kills my handwriting, and left, and right, also bottom here. So top and bottom are defined in y-axis, and left and right are defined in x-axis. So let's come to the code. Okay, let's start from our previous plain D&D example. So to give you guys an overview about how the rectangle and how the x-axis and y-axis work in our system, I'll simply print out those red top, left, right thing in the drag start event, and also the cursor of the current pointer in that function as well. So in the onDrag start event, we have item drag start. So in that function, we first need to query the rectangle of that position. To do that, first let's find out, well, is our card tag. In this case, which is a li tag here, which has a class called draggable. So what we can do is we'll let card equals this dot template dot query selector. It actually remembers that by my editor, because I have that code in our D&D item component, so it just reminds me of that, which is draggable. Now once we have that card defined, we can use this function, use card.getBounding client red. This is a method which we can get the red of the card. Once we have that, we can use console.log to print out is the top, left, right, and bottom of this rectangle. Dot top. Once we have that, we can copy and paste. Left. Then we have, sorry. Then we have bottom, and we have right. Okay, now let's print out the X and Y position for the cursor as well. To get that, we usually get from the event itself. So let's start console.log cursor. Let's stick with this one. Cursor X is, which usually is event, which we get from here. Dot client X log cursor Y is, wow, it already reminds me of that. It's provided by Tabline, which is a great tool. I recommend you guys using that actually, which is a great tool for auto completion though. Okay, so this code will tell us about the red position of the rectangle and also the cursor. Now let's push the code. Let's push -F. Okay, once it's having here, let's refresh the page to reload everything. Okay, now let's test this. First, let's look at the developer tool and go to the console. And let's drag the React item from this list into complete list. And we'll watch the console of the developer tool. We can see the top is 235, the left is 24, the bottom is 312, and the right is 324, which we can get the size of this rectangle as well. And we can see the cursor of the X is 123, which is between left and right, and we can see the Y is between top and bottom as well. Okay, also to give you guys an idea about what the red size actually means, we go to the elements here. See if we have this Python here. Inspect this one. We go to the li part. This one actually has the size of itself and has a border and padding. That top left thing actually includes the padding and border. It's actually this rectangle here, which includes the border and padding. I want you guys to remember that. Okay, now we have all this knowledge. We can go to the beautiful DND code itself. So what happens is once we drag one of the item to another list, say we collide with the items in the target list, we want to be informed that we have collided the item in the other list, and we want to set the padding of this view to be actually the padding to actually be the size of the original rectangle. So that's what we need to do here. Now let's come to the code. Okay, so in this one, we still have three components, which is a beautiful DND theme thing, which we have the main container, which is a beautiful DND. We have the DND item, we have the DND list as well. And in the item, the item HTML, now we should not only listen to the drag start, which passing the dragging ID, we should also listen to the onDrag event. This event triggers a lot of times when you drag when on the process of dragging from the original position to the destination. It files hundreds of times per second, which the concept which we also need to remember that and take care of that in the future, which I'll show later. And let's go into the item drag part. It actually files the event which we have the mouse over. We find the mouse hover event. You can pretty much define this to be any name, which will actually post three things, which including the event.client x, if you remember, that's the position of the mouse. So it will tell dynamically about where our current cursor is by the x-axis and y-axis. We'll also pass a third parameter, which is our category, which is the current task category. The reason we are doing that is because when we drag it over, we don't want it to actually have the padding when it's in its own list, because we don't want to its own list to give its own position. We just want to the other list to do that. So that's why we pass a category as well. This part I will explain to you later why we're doing this one. And once we pass that, we go into the list part. The list part actually should, when we get the approval, we should pass all the way up to its parent container, which is the main container. The reason we're doing this is because the list itself shouldn't handle this. It should be handled by every list. Actually, it shouldn't be handled by its parent list, because the item we dragged is if we drag Python from work in progress list to complete list, the parent list of this Python item is this list, work in progress list, which is the list we don't want to respond. We want this complete list to respond. Actually, if we don't have just only two lists, we have multiple lists. We want to every list to be listening to this. It's not just its own parent. So that's why we need to pass all the way up to its parent container. So once we get into the parent container, which is beautiful DND here, we need to handle the on-mouse hover event here. In this one, we need to query all the list and find the ret of all the list's items rectangle, and go through all the rectangle of the items to find if it collides with that. We can look at the list handle collide function. This is the API function. Let's go to this list here. This is the API function. It checks whether the current cursor collide with the rectangle of its items. So it goes through the list of all its items. It queries first. It queries all the items first, and do a loop of all the items, and find if it has a collide of the current cursor of the item in this current situation. If it has collide, we set the padding of that. So the padding is pretty much if it's true, we set the padding to be one card space. If it's false, we set it back. Okay, so let's look at the code in the item itself, which we can show you. Sorry, it's not this one. It's a DND item, this one here. If it's true, it will set the top to be 77 pixels. Sorry, this shouldn't be hard-coded, but this is just a sample project, so I don't care about that. I query the number, which is 77 pixels. I just set it up here. And if it's not, it's set back to 0. Also, it has another API function, which is called getRect, which again queries the rectangle of the current li element, and get that, which returns the top left, etc. thing, back to its parent. And once it checks the collision is happening, it will set the padding, so which will set the space there. Let's get back to the list function. When we see the list function also, we have this one. So you remember when we pass the drag event, we pass the category as well, and we check the category whether it matches with the items category. If the same thing, it belongs to the same list, so we don't want to do this, we just return it anyway. But if it's not the same list, which will query through all the items in the list and find the collision. If its collision is happening, we set the padding. If the collision is not happening, just remember to set the padding to be false, because the thing is, let's go back to the beautiful DND here. If we drag here, now the Lightning Web component has its padding. Once we move that to another, say, programming item, we want to set the Lightning Web component's padding back to 0. So that's why we need to have this one here. If it's not having any collision, we should set the padding back to false. The collide ret function is not predefined by LWC. It's predefined by some other libraries, but not in Salesforce though. So we need to define this by ourselves, which is not a hard function to write though. We just check whether the position of x, cursor x, is greater than left, but smaller than right. Also, the y position is greater than top, but smaller than bottom. We can say it is true. Otherwise, it's false. And also remember, this includes the padding as well. So which means when we have this, we have the Python moved here. If the collision is happening with the padding section here, it also shows the padding, which is what we want here. So that's why I want to remind you guys this rectangle size includes the padding and border as well. Okay, so this is pretty much the logic part of how everything works. In the item, we have onDrag event, and we listen to that event. It fires hundreds of times per second, and it goes up event, populates all the way up to its parent list and to its parent container, and the parent container say, okay, let's all the list to check whether its items has a collision with the current dragging item. If it has collision, we just set the padding, otherwise we set the padding back to 0. That's what's happening. But if you just have this code, it will not work. Actually, it will black out and hence the whole LWC. Why is that? It's because this drag event is happening hundreds of times per second. And all this loop thing, when we go, all this firing event, all this loop thing, we loop through every list, loops through every item in every list and check whether it has collision or not collision and set padding. It happens hundreds of times per second, which is insane, which will have too much computation burden for Salesforce multi-tenancy platform, which we shouldn't do that. In other systems, we usually have is an idea called FPS, which we define by doing this at a certain frequency per second. Usually in game area, we have the FPS to be 60 or 30 if it's low quality something. But in our area, because it's just the animation of the drag and drop, we don't need to have too much, so we set to be 10, which is good enough. So how do we have that concept is what I need to show you is the DND item list, DND item itself. So we set the interval to be 100. 100 is milliseconds, so 100 milliseconds, which is 0.1 second. So which if we have interval to be 0.1 millisecond, which means the FPS is 10. So we have the current time to be now. And we also set the last timestamp. We predefine that to be the time when we initialize the whole component. So we have the initial time of that. And once we have that, we always check whether the current time is greater than the previous time plus the interval time, which is 0.1 second. If it's greater than that, or only if it's greater than that, we file the event. Otherwise, we don't file the event. Also remember, if we file the event, we again set the last timestamp to be this time, to this current time, so it remembers that and pass in the FPS interval. In that case, only files 10 times, which is kind of handleable by the CPU time in the multi-tenancy environment. Okay, that's pretty much all about that. Once you push everything of the code, which including the FPS and the collision of the cursor to that, you can see all the things happening in here. So if you drag here, it will show that the animation is always giving the place. But if you drag back to the original list, it's not happening. So that's pretty much all about today's content. Hope you enjoy that. Again, you can find all my code in my GitHub repository. I'll also post the link in the list down below, in the comment section down below. You can find it there. And if you like this video, please let me know and click the like button and subscribe to my channel. And thank you for that. And if you have any comments for that, just let me know in the comments area down below. Thank you for that. Thank you. Bye.